Waffles. What's up everyone, it's Goose, and today I accidentally took a 2-hour nap. Today I wanted to answer a question that's really been lingering on my mind, and I just wanted to basically answer my curiosity. And that's, are all IR loaders created equal? If you're familiar with my channel, I do a lot of comparison between these modeler units. And a lot of what I do is I compare amp models with these units. And I like to control for the IR because the cabinet is like one of the biggest parts of a guitar tone. And when you control for the IR between a lot of these modeler units, the differences start to shrink in terms of the quality of the amp models. It also helps that a lot of the third-party IRs sound better than most of the stock IRs in these models. But one thing I can't control for is whether or not these units load their IRs differently, like if they process the sound from the IR differently. So that's what we're going to answer today, is whether or not these units do IR processing differently. Before we move on, if you like guitar gear and comparisons of guitar gear and just general guitar nerdery, consider hitting like and subscribe. All right, so today's video is going to involve both my PV Invective MH and my Friedman Runt 50. And the IRs I'll be using come from Forward Audio. I'm changing it up a bit from the usual Ownhammer and York Audio IRs that I use. I recently bought their Modern Metals Essential IR pack, but you actually also get the Modern Rock IR pack for free when you sign up. So that might be cool for some folks. And full disclosure, I have had a few messages with Forward Audio. However, I haven't agreed to do any videos or anything. I just bought this IR pack on my own because I figured, why not? Let's just try something new. Anyway, we'll be doing a mid-gain punk / rock type tone with the Friedman, and then we'll be doing a metal high gain tone with the PV. The setup will be centered around my Suhr reactive load IR, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to run both of these amps into this unit and then send that signal without an IR to the other units. But we're also going to use the IR section here as kind of a control and just a base to compare the other three modelers. The modelers we'll be using are the HX Stomp XL, the Quad Cortex, oh god it's heavy, and the Fractal FM9. The modelers won't be running anything other than a cab block, so when these amps go into them, all they're going to be seeing is that cabinet block. All the global EQs on these units will be turned off. And the last thing I want to note is that the Suhr reactive load actually truncates IRs to only 20.5 milliseconds, which, as I've heard, does affect the bass frequency, so it'll be less bassy. But in the comparisons, it'll still actually be pretty close, so yeah. We'll start with the Friedman on the BE channel for some punk / rock riffs, and that one will be running the Forward Audio green basket case mix. As usual, we'll start with some simple notes and chords and then move on to the actual riffs. One last thing, compared to usual comparisons, the differences here are actually pretty subtle, so I recommend using like headphones for this comparison in particular. The overdrive will be my Boss SD1 in the standard mode. It's the Wazacraft, but it's in the standard mode. And then my guitar will be my Kizo Osiris. And with that out of the way, let's get started with the riffs. All right, so the differences are pretty subtle. However, there are a few things to note. The Suhr reactive load is the tightest sounding here. Again, that could be because of the truncated IR file. The Quad Cortex has a bit of a kind of high mid spike somewhere, maybe even lower treble spike. And it's most apparent when you are playing power chords as well. The HX Stomp has like a low mid emphasis, and it's kind of like a growl almost, like a low mid growl. And I kind of like it because it actually makes palm mutes a little bit more satisfying. It is a slight bit rolled off on the top end compared to the other modelers though. The Fractal has like a slight bit of crunchy compression to it compared to the other units. I think it's balanced sounding and it feels good under the fingers because of that added compression. But in playback, the only thing that I would note is that it just sounds very, very slightly more processed than the other units. Again, none of that means that any of these units are like definitive in terms of what's better or worse. It just depends on what you prefer. So like if you want a little bit more sizzle, maybe the Quad Cortex. If you want a bit of low mid grunt, maybe the HX Stomp XL. And then for the FM9, maybe if you want something that's a little bit more mix ready already. All right, so next we're going to be looking at the Invective with the Modern Metal IR, which is going to be running the Fredman 1 solid mix. And Fredman just means 2 SM57s mic'd at an angle. And once again, we'll be running the Boss SD1 overdrive in front of it. All right, with that out of the way, let's go. All right, so again, the differences are subtle, but the Suhr definitely felt the best when going through faster riffs. And that just might have to do with the fact that the IR file is truncated, so it's just less bassy overall. The neural actually now has a bit of bass bloom now that there's added gain to it with this IR. However, that like low treble peak, it's still kind of there, but it's not quite as prominent anymore with more gain added. The Helix is the warmest sounding, and if you listen to like the riffs that go into the higher frets, you'll notice that like it feels like there's a little bit more of a roll off in the high end. Not too much, but definitely something that you can notice if you just play the clips back to back. I cannot speak today. But again, that low mid roar that it has, I actually think is really cool. It's something that I feel like complements the tone of the PV Invective really, really well. And once again, Fractal adds just a light touch of compression to it. It feels a little bit more crunchy. And again, it could be considered more mix ready in that regard. However, the mids are just slightly more tube screamery to my ears, which, you know, I had a Boss SD1 run in front, which is kind of a tube screamer. All right, so in conclusion, I'm actually surprised that there was an audible difference. I was expecting to feel a difference because just playing through digital units, even with the DI, they do sometimes feel very different. I'd imagine that the output signal has a slightly different frequency response between all of these units. However, I do feel like there were audible differences, and they're very subtle, again, which is why I recommend using headphones for this comparison. But the feel is definitely something you notice more. And I think that's really important for a lot of folks who are using tube amps into IRs, and that is a legitimate setup if you want like to have the feel of a tube amp, but you want a silent stage or something, or if you want something that's just a bit better for, you know, playing later at night in your room. And the feel of a tube amp can be very different as well. So an orange feels very different to play on their fingers than like a PV. But that's actually why I think knowing how the IRs are processed was important, because that changes the feel under the fingers. So if you want something brighter or warmer to complement whatever tube amp you're playing, it's good to know the differences. And audibly, the differences are subtle, so it's really where you want to put that last 3% of your tone. If I were to pick my favorite, it would have to be the HX Stomp in terms of just the IR loading capabilities there. I just think that low mid growl is actually kind of welcome in how that makes the amp feel. But that's just my preference, and some people might prefer the feel of the other modelers in terms of the IR. I think any of these units will serve you very, very well. It's just what you prefer. But yeah, let me know which one you liked more in the comments down below. Anyway, that's gonna do it for me. Hope y'all enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch y'all in the next one. Later.